Coele-Syria, or Coele-Syria, also rendered as Coele-Syria and Coele-Syria, was a region of Syria in classical antiquity. It probably derived from the Aramaic for all of the region of Syria, but more often was applied to the Beqaa valley between the Lebanon and Anti-Lebanon mountain ranges. The area now forms part of the modern nations of Lebanon, Syria and Israel. Name. It is widely accepted that the term Coel is a transcription of Aramaic Kul, meaning all, the entire, such that the term originally identified all of Syria. The word Coel, which literally means hollow in Koine Greek, is thought to have come about via a folk etymology referring to the hollow Beqaa valley between Mount Lebanon and the Anti-Lebanon mountains. However, the term Coele-Syria was also used in a wider sense to indicate all Syria, or all Syria except Phoenicia, by the writers Pliny, Arrian, Ptolemy and also Diodorus Siculus, who indicated Coele-Syria to at least stretch as far south as Joppa, while Polybius stated that the border between Egypt and Coele-Syria lay between the towns of Rena Calara and Raphia. The first and only official use of the term was during the period of Seleucid rule of the region, between c. 200 BCE and 64 BCE. During this period, the term Coele-Syria and Phoenicia, or Coele-Syria, was also used in a narrower sense to refer to the former Ptolemaic territory which the Seleucids now controlled, being the area south of the river Eleutherus. This usage was adopted by Strabo and the books of the Maccabees. However, Greek writers such as Agatharchides and Polemon of Athens used the term Palestine to refer to the region during this period, which was a term originally given circa 450 BCE by Herodotus. Later during the Roman period c. 350 CE, Eunuppus wrote that the capital of Coele-Syria was the Seleucid city of Antioch, which is north of the Eleutherus. Official usage. According to Polybius, a former officer of the Ptolemaic Empire, named Ptolemy Thrace, having fought in the 217 BCE Battle of Raphia, defected to the Seleucid king Antiochus III the Great. Antiochus gave him the title Strategos Anarchieres of Coele-Syria and Phoenicia. Some scholars speculate that this title may have been used previously by the Ptolemies, but no direct evidence exists to support this. Syrian Wars. The region was disputed between the Seleucid dynasty and the Ptolemaic dynasty during the Syrian Wars. Alexander the Great General Ptolemy first occupied Coele-Syria in 318 BC. However, when Ptolemy joined the coalition against Antigonus I Monophthalmus in 313 BC, he quickly withdrew from Coele-Syria. In 312 BC Seleucus I Nicator defeated Demetrius, the son of Antigonus, in the Battle of Gaza, which again allowed Ptolemy to occupy Coele-Syria, though he was again to pull out after only a few months. After Demetrius had won a battle over his general and Antigonus entered Syria in force up to Antigonus's. This brief success had enabled Seleucus to make a dash for Babylonia, which Seleucus secured. In 3002 BC, Ptolemy joined a new coalition against Antigonus and reoccupied Coele-Syria, but quickly withdrew on hearing a false report that Antigonus had won a victory. He was only to return when Antigonus had been defeated at Ipsus in 301 BC. Coele-Syria was assigned to Seleucus by the victors of Ipsus, as Ptolemy had added nothing to the victory. Though, given Ptolemy's track record, he was unlikely to organize a serious defense of Coele-Syria. Seleucus acquiesced in Ptolemy's occupation. Probably because Seleucus remembered how it had been with Ptolemy's help he had re-established himself in Babylonia. The later Seleucids were not to be so understanding, resulting in the century of Syrian wars between the Ptolemies and Seleucids. The Battle of Panium in 200 BC, during the Fifth Syrian War, was the final decisive battle between the two sides in ending Ptolemaic control over the region. The 171–168 BC conflicts over Coele-Syria, between Antiochus IV Epiphanes and Ptolemy VI Philometor, are discussed in Livy's The History of Rome from its foundation. Seleucid control over the area of Judea began diminishing with the eruption of the Maccabean revolt in 165 BC. With Seleucid troops being involved in warfare on the Parthian front, Judea succeeded in securing its independence by 140 BC. Despite attempts of Seleucid rulers to regain territories, the conquests of Pompey in 64 BC were a decisive blow to them, and Syria became part of the Roman Republic. Upper Syria. Under the Macedonian kings, Upper Syria was divided into 4 parts which were named after their capitals. Later in the Roman Pompeian era, the province was divided into 9 districts, nomenclatures of Syria. Judging from Arrian and the Anabasis of Alexander, the historians of Alexander the Great, as well as more ancient authors, gave the name of Syria to all the country comprehended between the Tigris and the Mediterranean, the part to the east of the Euphrates. Afterwards named Mesopotamia was called Syria between the rivers, that to the west was called by the general name Coele-Syria, and although Phoenicia and Palestine were sometimes separated from it, yet it was often comprehended as the whole country as far as Egypt. Wars over Coele-Syria given by Polybius c. 150 BCE. Ptolemy, marching on Pelusium, made his first halt at that city, and after picking up stragglers and serving out rations to his men moved on, marching through the desert and skirting Mount Cassius and the marshes called Barathra. Reaching the spot he was bound for on the 5th day, he encamped at a distance of 50 staves from Raphia, which is the first city of Coele-Syria on the Egyptian side after Rhinocolura. Boundaries of Egypt given by Diodorus Siculus c. 50 BCE, having spoken of the 3 boundaries of Egypt, by which it is distinguished from the rest of the continent, we now proceed to the next. The 4th side is nearly surrounded with a vast sea, without any harbours, being a very long and tedious voyage, and very difficult to find any place of landing. For from Parsitonium in Africa, to Joppa in Coele-Syria, for the space almost of 5,000 furlongs, there is not one safe harbour to be found, except Pharis. Later authors in the Roman period would differ much in settling the limits of Coele-Syria, some extending and others contracting them. Strabo says, Coele-Syria propria is defined by Libanus and Anti-Libanus, running parallel to each other. Now if we determine the limits of these 2 mountains, we shall go near to settle those of Coele-Syria. They both begin a little above the sea, Libanus near Tripolis, chiefly against the spot called Dei Faces, Anti-Libanus at Sidon, but they terminate near the mountains of Arabia, above the territory of Damascus, and near the mountains of the Trachonitis, and there they terminate in other mountains. Circa 40 CE, Philo of Alexandria in his written work on the life of Moses, when then Moses, he received the supreme authority, with the goodwill of all his subjects, God himself being the regulator and approver of all his actions. He conducted his people as a colony into Phoenicia, and into the whole Syria, and Palestine, which was at that time called the land of the Canaanites, the borders of which country were 3 days' journey distant from Egypt. Circa 40 CE, Pomponius Mela in his written work, Description of the World, Syria holds a broad expanse of the littoral, as well as lands that extend rather broadly into the interior, and it is designated by different names in different places. For example, it is called Coele, Mesopotamia, Judea, Commagene, and Sophene. It is Palestine at the point where Syria abuts the Arabs, then Phoenicia, and then, where it reaches Cilicia, Antiochia. In Palestine, however, is Gaza, a mighty and well-fortified city. The name Syria comes from the ancient Greek regional name for the Levantine colonies and colonial territories which they had established and which were formerly comprehended as part of Assyria. Syria had an uncertain border to the northeast that Pliny the Elder describes as including from west to east, Commagene, Sophene, and Adiabene. In Pliny's time, Syria was administratively divided into a number of provinces with various degrees of autonomy under the Roman Empire, such as the Iturae or Iturii, who were a people of Coele-Syria famous for shooting with a bow. The wood of the trees called yuza bent into Iturian bows. Circa 70 CE, Pliny the Elder, in his written work, Natural History, next to these countries on the coast is Syria, once the greatest of lands. It had a multitude of divisions with different names. The part adjacent to Arabia was previously known as Palestine or Judea or Coele. Circa 100 CE, Josephus, in his written work, Antiquities of the Jews, Antiochus made a friendship and league with Ptolemy, and gave him his daughter Cleopatra in marriage, and yielded up to him Coele-Syria and Samaria and Judea and Phoenicia by way of dowry. Circa 150 CE, Appian, in his written work, Roman History, intending to write the history of the Romans, I have deemed it necessary to begin with the boundaries of the nations under their sway. Here, turning our course and passing round, we take in Palestine, Syria, and beyond it a part of Arabia. The Phoenicians hold the country next to Palestine on the sea, and beyond the Phoenician territory are Coele-Syria, and the parts stretching from the sea as far inland as the river Euphrates, namely Palmyra and the sandy country round about, extending even to the Euphrates itself. Decapolis was so called from its 10 cities enumerated by Pliny, and with them he reckons up, among others, the tetrarchy of Abila in the same Decapolis, which demonstrates the Abila Decapolis and Abila Lysanii to be the same place, and Thoit cannot be denied, but that some of Pliny's 10 cities are not far distant from that near Jordan, yet it doth not appear that ever this other had the title of a tetrarchy. Here it is to be observed that what Pliny calls Decapolis, Ptolemy makes his Coele-Syria, and the Coele-Syria of Pliny is that part of Syria about Aleppo, formerly called Chalcidane, Syristis, etc. Towns in Coele-Syria given by Ptolemy c. 150 CE: Heliopolis, Abila, which is called Lycinia, Sana, Ina, Samulize, Abida, Capitolias, Adra, Canatha. The governor of Syria retained the civil administration of the whole large province undiminished, and held for long alone in all Asia a command of the first rank. It was only in the course of the 2nd century that a diminution of his prerogatives occurred, when Hadrian took one of the 4 legions from the governor of Syria and handed it over to the governor of Palestine. It was Severus who at length withdrew the first place in the Roman military hierarchy from the Syrian governor, after having subdued the province, which had wished at that time to make Niger emperor, as it had formerly done with its governor Vespasian. Amidst resistance from the capital Antioch in particular, he ordained its partition into a northern and a southern half, and gave to the governor of the former, which was called Coele-Syria, 2 legions. To the governor of the latter, the province of Syro-Phoenicia, 1 legion. Boundaries of the Promised Land, given by Jerome c. 400 CE. You may delineate the Promised Land of Moses from the Book of Numbers, as bounded on the south by the desert tract called Sina, between the Dead Sea and the city of Kadesh Barnea, which is located with the Arabah to the east, and continues to the west, as far as the river of Egypt, that discharges into the open sea near the city of Reno Calara, as bounded on the west by the sea along the coasts of Palestine, Phoenicia, Coele-Syria, and Cilicia, as bounded on the north by the circle formed by the Taurus Mountains and Zephyrium, and extending to Hamath, called Epiphany Syria, as bounded on the east by the city of Antioch, Hippos, and Lake Kinneret, now called Tiberias, and then the Jordan River, which discharges into the Salt Sea, now called the Dead Sea. Circa 400 CE. Eunuppus, in his written work, Lives of Philosophers and Sophists, Libanius was born at Antioch, the capital of Coele-Syria as it is called. This city was founded by Seleucus surnamed Nicator. Capital of the Seleucid Empire was Antioch. Capital of the Syria Coele was Antioch. Image gallery. Persian period and Diadochi period. Hellenistic period. Roman period.